We're sitting at a table in this restaurant, and it's a restaurant on a Friday night that's got no tables empty. And the maitre d' comes to the table, and he says, "Pardon me, gentlemen," he says, "is there Frank Gimbel at this table?" I said, "Yeah, I'm Frank Gimbel. I have a phone call for you." I said to myself, what the fuck? Who could possibly know I'm in this restaurant? I couldn't tell you where I'm at. And I went to the phone, and I picked it up, and I said, "Frank Gimbel. Frank, this is Mitch Rogovin. You don't know me. I know you're having dinner there, and I am the Assistant Attorney General of the United States. And I've just come from a meeting with the Attorney General, Ramsey Clark. And I'm afraid that the purpose for my call is that you are going to have to move for a continuance of the Balistrieri case on Monday morning." I said, "Mitch, you're not serious." "Yes, I'm serious." "Why would I do that? This case has been scheduled for 6 months. Judge Poose and I are good pals. I'm going to get up there on Monday morning and I'm going to say, 'Your Honor, we need an adjournment of this case.' And he's going to say, 'What's the basis?' And I say, 'I don't know,' or I don't know." He said, "Well, I'll tell you what. I'm going to come and see you tomorrow. I'm going to call you tomorrow. We'll see if we can move down the road from that. But right now, you're instructed to ask for an adjournment on Monday morning." So I go from the phone call to the table, and they say, "Who was it?" I said, "You won't believe this story." And I tell them the story, and I pass out, literally. Mm-hmm. I'm on the ground. Next thing I know, I got the fire department has got a face mask on me. And they said, "Mr. Gimbel, we're going to have to take you to the hospital." I said, "You're not taking me to the hospital." "Well, we have to, or you have to sign a release." I said, "I'll sign a release. Give me the release." Sign the release. I said, "You'll drive me to Springfield." I explained to the people at the table what had just happened, and they were dumbfounded. And everybody in the restaurant's looking at us because here's this young stud laying on the floor, and they're figuring, what's going on here? Well, to move the story along, I go to Springfield at 10 o'clock in the morning. Mitch Rogovin calls. He says, I'm coming out there. I'm bringing another lawyer along, and here's why. Yesterday, Friday, Mr. Balistrieri was taking some paneling down from his office on Downer Avenue, and he found a microphone. And he has the microphone. And the Attorney General and I and other relevant people were trying to figure out, what are we going to do about this? Because it's our microphone. But it's not your microphone. It's not the IRS's microphone. And the IRS knows nothing about this wiretap and has got no information from it. So you're going to advise the court on Monday morning about this illegal FBI wiretap, and you're going to request that the court start the proceedings as a motion to suppress hearing. Now, by this time, I had tried, I'm going to say, 15 cases, maybe more, okay? And I'm a self-confident fellow to begin with. And so I said, okay, let's see what happens. And lo and behold, on Monday morning, the first thing I do, I go into the courtroom, and here on the wall, the defense side, is Maury Walsh, Jim Shallow, two other schmagaggy lawyers from Milwaukee. I couldn't tell their names. They just carried the briefcases, and Frank Balistrieri. And if you'd see Frank Balistrieri, he was about 5'7" tall, immaculately dressed. He had handmade suits in those days. It was part of my net worth prosecution of him that he paid like $600 or $700 for. But the point of my story is that there's a package on their table. I tell the bailiff, you got to get the jurors out of here. He says, I got to talk to the judge. He goes in, comes out. He says, okay. And he said, why? And I said, well, there's a matter I got to bring up before the court before we start picking the jury. And so he shoos out this multi-hundred people. And the judge comes out, and he says, we're here, United States of America versus Frank Balistrieri. Appearances, please. I get up. My name is Franklin M. Gimbel. I'm Assistant United States Attorney for the Eastern District of Wisconsin. So before we start, Your Honor, with the voir dire, I have to make a disclosure. Okay, what's your disclosure? I said, it was brought to my attention over the weekend that Mr. Balistrieri recovered a microphone from his one of his offices in Milwaukee, and I am disclosing that instrument was installed by the FBI in Milwaukee for intelligence about organized crime in Milwaukee involving Mr. Balistrieri. And Balistrieri's looking at me now like he's trying to measure me. How big is the box going to be that I'm going to be planted in? And I said, nonetheless, I'm assuring the court that this case has not been infected by any information that was collected by this illegal means. And I am urging the court to consider that instead of picking a jury in this case or dismissing the case, which I suspect the defense will be seeking, that we start out with a motion to suppress hearing. Mr. Walsh, what do you have to say? And Walsh gets up, and he comes up, and he makes a fist, and he puts it within 1/2 an inch of my nose. This lawyer, he says, referring to me, has the audacity to suggest that there is anything that this court can do other than to dismiss the case with prejudice forthwith and demand and cause an obligation on the federal government to pay all of Mr. Balistrieri's legal expenses. This is the worst case of government misconduct that I have ever seen or known about. And he says, Mr. Gimbel, and I told him that a person like Mr. Balistrieri has generated a lot of interest by law enforcement agencies. I said, I'm not going to get into that because it's not relevant to your decision here. I'm only saying that the FBI and the IRS and other parts of the federal government may have globally the same kinds of objectives, but they don't share with each other what they do. And I said, the FBI in particular under Mr. Hoover doesn't share with anybody. He takes from everybody and gives back to nobody. And so I'm going to take a 5-minute recess. He walks off, and he comes back in 5 minutes. He says, I'm satisfied that Mr. Gimbel's representation about his unawareness of any information that came from this source is a part of this case, and I'm going to give him an opportunity to show that by starting the case as a motion to suppress hearing. When do you want to do that, Mr. Gimbel? Today. Well, now it's about 11 o'clock. How about 1 o'clock? 1 o'clock we'll start. How long did the motion to suppress hearing go? Take a guess.
7.5 minutes.
Okay.
7 days.
4 weeks. I called every single IRS agent that worked the case. I called 12 or 15 FBI guys who worked the wiretap. And the end game was there was no communication between the two agencies. And the guy who was in charge of the wiretap was an FBI agent by the name of Warren Dunn. Now, that name may or may not be something you know. Warren Dunn comes to see me after we convict Balistrieri, after like a 3-month trial with a 1-month interruption because Maury Walsh had a heart attack. And we took a break in the jury trial for him to recover.
Jeez.
And came to see me and said, I have a chance to go to work for Miller Brewing Company as assistant general counsel when it was owned by the company that ran the Greyhound bus. And I says, call him from here and take the job. And he did. And he became the president of Miller Brewing Company. But in any event, we had this motion to suppress hearing. The judge severed one count. We had 2 substantive tax evasion counts and 1 account of behaving in a way to sidestep his obligations to pay taxes, and he was afraid that that's too gray. And I tried the case, in the middle of which, as I said, one morning a guy shows up, and it ain't Maury Walsh, and it's a lawyer from Chicago, and he says, we need an adjournment. Mr. Walsh is in the hospital with a heart attack, but he's going to recover. We need a 3-week adjournment. Mr. Gimbel, what's your position? I oppose it. Jim Shuttle's one of the top criminal lawyers in the country. He can try the case. And the guy who he sends, who became a federal judge in Chicago, says, Mr. Balistrieri has not shared with Mr. Schello many of the things that are relevant to this case, only with Mr. Walsh. So the judge says, all right, I'm giving you a 3-week adjournment, which it became a 4-week adjournment. And that was in the middle of the substantive case.
Jeez.
And we tried the case and finished it. It was a great learning experience for me.
Same jury came back 4 weeks later?
Yeah. And what happened was curious. We started with 16 jurors. We were down to 13. And the day that we reconvene after Walsh comes back to court, one of the jurors says, Judge, I'm going to need to be off tomorrow because I got to pick up some farm implement equipment and I can't be here. And if he had gone, we'd have been down to 12. And so the judge says, Mr. Gimbel, what's your position about this? I says, well, my position is that I don't want to agree to have this case with 12 jurors in the box unless Mr. Walsh is willing to stipulate to a decision by less than a 12-person jury. He says, fuck you. No way. And so we took the day off so the guy could get his farm implement equipment. And we finished the trial, and, it got to be pushy-shovey, and it was tense.
What was the ultimate conviction on that?
He was convicted of tax evasion,
And
2 counts.
what was
He's
the- what was
sentenced
the
to 2 years in prison.
Sentenced to 2 years?
And I went to the Court of Appeals in the Seventh Circuit twice. I went to the United States Supreme Court, and I went back to the trial court after I left the government. And it held up.
Was that his longest conviction?
No,
Okay.
no. He was thereafter charged with a bunch of stuff related to mob relationships, and then they had legal lawyers. And that's what got him. And that's why the mafia is kind of out of business today, because the government can and does wiretap everybody.